So I wanted to build off of many of the things we heard in this session. So we heard Joyce from BU talking about an initiative that was top down and bottom up, with the provost appointing her, thank you, to lead an effort at their university to assemble gender equity related activities. And then we heard from Bonnie. And from a research center perspective, she spoke quite a bit at different times about unconscious bias education. And it sounded like they're getting to a point of wanting to know even more about best practices around the world with unconscious bias education. And then we just heard from ARU a lot about networking. And it was wonderful to see how HR is interacting with that team. Don't know if they realize how lucky you are and unique, to have HR as that kind of a thought partner with a group of change agents at that institution. So I hope to build off of all of those things with what I'm going to talk about. So I'm from a university in upstate New York, about 5 hours from the city of New York City. Our institution is it's fairly large. We're the 10th or 11th largest private institution in the United States, about 18,000 students. We have some unique colleges at RIT. One in particular is the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, which means that in the United States, if you're deaf, if you qualify as being deaf or at a certain level of hard of hearing and you're a high school student, you can go to universities for free, and there's two of them that you get to choose from. One is Gallaudet in Washington, and that's more for liberal arts and sciences. And RIT is if you're interested in technology and engineering, computer science, and whatnot. So the impact to me as a faculty member, I often teach classes with deaf students in the room. We have over 2,500 deaf students. That translates to about 70 or 80 deaf and hard of hearing faculty on our campus. So it's a very interesting dimension of where I work, and a reason why I actually chose to join RIT about 15 years ago. So RIT also has a mix of engineering, computer science, technology, and art. So we have a very large, or I should say a very prestigious and world-renowned photography program in the American Schools of Craftsmen. Art is there. Rochester's the home of Kodak Eastman Corporation. So Kodak, father of photography, that is one of the reasons why we have that. And about 15 years ago, we began a transition from a teaching university to more of a teacher-scholar, so a more balanced research institution. So I wanted to then segue into advance. So you've heard a number of talks up until this point from schools that have advance grants. Just wanted to let you know, advance started in 2001. It was in response to our national context within the U.S., where we were seeing a rise in the percentage of women who were getting PhDs in STEM, and yet an underrepresentation in the academy around women. As far as at all ranks, but especially at the highest ranks within the faculty of universities. The National Science Foundation also would like to see a more balanced workforce around gender in science and engineering. So in response to all of that, they created an advanced grant program in the early 2000s. This program was designed to address both academic culture and institutional structures. So I'm going to talk a bit how we did those things. RIT was awarded one of these grants in 2012. We were awarded $3.4 million. The university, US dollars, the university put another $600,000 or $700,000 into it. So we have over $4 million starting in 2012. And we have this slide in here because we've always thought about what happens after the 11. After the grant ends, what's going to happen to all of the initiatives that we do. So I want to talk about, we're right around that time. We have about 1 year left before the grant is completely done. So we've done a lot, and I'm not going to talk about all the things we've done. I have some slides that talk about them, and if you have more questions on any of them, I'd be happy to answer you. But we are in a strategic, really crucial time right now on sustainability of the various efforts. Okay. So we also like to think about advanced funding as almost like duct tape for a university. It sticks things. You know, it's when you get an advanced grant, there's a lot of prestige, a lot of funding, but there's also a lot of attention. You get visited all the time from NSF or your external evaluators, your external advisory board. And those things have helped us greatly to be able to see how we look in the mirrors that these people hold up. We've gotten tougher, you know? That kind of critical evaluation can do that. You can take that in and get a lot better. So all of those things were motivated from the structure of having an advanced grant. So that's what we mean by, we were really, once we accepted the grant, we also accepted these implications. And as a result, they helped us stick. We had to do these things. There was a lot of exposure and expectations around that. So then how do you continue this beyond the funding cycle? Beyond the time when you have NSF visiting you and maybe external evaluators visiting you once or twice a year. So the steps that I'll talk briefly about is the way that we went about institutionalization, where we spent quite a bit of time on this initiating process of building the cause, the reasons around why we needed to change. And then a lot of time on partnering and ideation of what we were going to do. And then finally, the actual doing, the creation, the administration, a lot of policy work was done. So those are the kinds of things I wanted to talk briefly about before getting a little bit into closing thoughts and how we're going about the institutionalization process. So the shining the light, the initiating the grant, before we got an advanced grant in 2012, we actually got an advanced IT catalyst, so a catalyst grant in 2008. Much less money from the federal government through NSF, but it was about $200,000 US. And that helped us conduct a series of lit reviews, benchmarking of other universities, objective data reviews where we worked very closely with human resources, and we also conducted the first climate survey that was targeted directly at faculty that we've ever had. And when I keep talking about we, our team is very faculty. It's very bottom kind of faculty focused. We all are now full professors, which has been wonderful to see several of the team members get promoted over the course of these 5 last years into full professor rank. So there's 7 of us who lead various initiatives, all at the full professor rank, all are women. They include physicists, computer scientists, engineers, as well as social scientists. So we have an ethnographer and a sociologist on our core team as well. We also have the president and provost who have asked key people in their organizations to work very closely with us. So we work closely with the VP of Strategic Planning as well as the senior associate provost. So that those 9 people form the team when I'm talking about the we. Consistently. So back to the IT Catalyst grant, this self-study. We conducted this over 3 years. I had mentioned the different ways that we did this. It was called Effort at RIT, and we have the detailed report that we created on our website. So we studied the representation, advancement, and recruitment, the resource allocations for women faculty. And we published that, and we also conducted climate surveys. So some of the things that we identified that helped us get an advanced grant where we were clearly able to show there were opportunities around career navigation, climate-related issues, work-life integration. Okay? And there's a 50-some page report justifying all of this. So clearly there was ample evidence to help tell the story. And then these are some of the just snippets of various opportunities where we were seeing that women were hired differently. They were hired with less credit, that they were leaving at a much higher rate, and that we had opportunities with representation based on our peer schools. We were lower than one would hope. There also was evidence of unexplained salary differentials that the university started to address right as soon as they found this out. Through the course of this grant, they began with corrective action on that, and that has continued to today, actually. So the framework then, we did the self-study, we created a strategic plan to put into NSF for review for an advanced grant, and these were basically the goals. The goal was to increase the representation and advancement of women faculty and also keep into account their advancement patterns around a number of objectives. So we wanted to get to the work environment itself, and create an environment where we are addressing workplace issues and opportunities that exist within the workplace. We wanted to, and we have spent a great deal of time creating an aligned and supportive culture. Cultural change is not easy. It takes a lot of thought, and I think it's a very exciting activity area, but it's probably the hardest thing that we do. We wanted to disrupt existing processes and create new ones that made more sense. And from the beginning, we had intersectionality in mind. As I mentioned, we have quite a few deaf students on campus and faculty, so we wanted to include their lived experiences, at least the faculty, the women faculty who are deaf and hard of hearing, as well as the lived experiences of women of color on campus in a very meaningful way in order for us to better design our interventions and initiatives. Through the universal design concept, I've seen time and time again that if you can meet the needs of subgroups that use a product or maybe within an organization, if you can meet their needs, chances are you're going to do a pretty good job meeting the needs of everyone. So that was a very intentional part of our grant. It's something I'm really proud about what the researchers were able to accomplish. So the step two, after the initiating, which took years, the partnering, which also took years and continues to take years. As Joyce said, trying to anticipate all the resistance in this is challenging. It's really, for people who like to think, these projects are great. There's just so much thinking required in trying to organize these projects, figure out what the accelerators are and where the resistance will be, and sometimes it does surprise you. But we spent quite a bit of time and continue to build partnerships within academic units, within administrative units. We work really closely with other women-type organizations on campus and have leveraged them, and ideally, our goal was to build them, which I think we've done a good job of. And then finally, the institutionalization and the ideation. So and the creation, the policy making and the creation of what we've accomplished. So some of the initiatives that have already undergone institutionalization are listed here, where we've got support for new parents. So there's been a number of I think very generous policy changes from HR as to how the benefits given to new parents through birth or adoption and for caregivers. So that has improved greatly in the last 5 years. We also now conduct regular climate surveys for faculty every 3 years, and we talk a lot about them, not only the advanced team, but the provost and the deans and all the people that you would hope would talk about climate surveys. They're talking about the results. We're still working on getting them to talk about the results by gender and by ethnicity, race. And we're working on also hearing status, because those are custom questions that we needed to add to the study. So that is a progression, but we're excited about the fact that we do these. Faculty exit interview process has been created through the course of the grant, working closely with HR. So that is another means of data. Dual career assistance program, we've worked closely with HR and academic affairs to create that, and we have one now in place. There's lots of opportunities to continue improving that program, but getting it in place took years, and we're really excited about where it could go from here. The NSF indicators, I mentioned when you get an NSF grant, a lot of people are watching what you're doing. One thing they require is that you do data. So to the SWAN Awards, bronze level, anyone who gets an advanced grant would likely qualify for a bronze level award because you have to collect the data and interpret the data and ideally do corrective actions based on what you're seeing in the data and explain patterns and whatnot. So much of that is a relatively new exercise for the university over the last 10 years, and we just keep getting better and better at that. And faculty salary equity analysis. I mentioned back in the days of our self-study, we found that there were inequities, and HR began to address those. Now, how they addressed them, of course, they gave people bumps in salaries. Every woman on the team got a bump in salary, by the way. And we got these letters letting us know, because we did a good job, we got a bump in salary. Well, I think we were all doing a good job, but that's not why we got this off-cycle bump in salary. So there wasn't I'm not saying that communication is the easiest thing to put out there, but the way that it was done is just an example of a missed opportunity. It shows a lack of transparency in the process. So we really saw an opportunity around how could we work with HR and institutional research and the CFO, the financial areas to help them create a salary study that we could actually take to the faculty and discuss. So we've done that, and that took a lot of time and energy in order to do that. But it was very important, an important first step for the institution to open up the black box, so to speak, of salary compensation for faculty at my institution. Other things that we're working on. Cultural change is something I mentioned. Advocates and Allies is a program that I know at the same time we were talking, there was the other track, they were talking about engaging men in these activities. Advocates and Allies is in the US. This is something that was developed through an advanced grant at North Dakota State University, and it's a way to engage men. So a group of male advocates are the most committed and invested in gender equity and equality. And at NDSU, North Dakota, though that group of men were mostly the spouses and partners of women faculty. So they were very committed to this. And then over time, they built an advocates network or an allies network. So this group of men held monthly coffees or drink sessions where they would have readings and talk about issues related to gender. So that's at NDSU. They also then developed some training around it. Well, RIT got a grant through the National Science Foundation 2 years ago with NDSU to bring that to our campus. So we are excited about the Allies and Advocates program, and it keeps building. Every workshop they do, more and more men are enrolling in it. So very exciting. Unconscious bias education, we've offered many different offerings to date, perhaps 12 or so, and they're fairly large scale. Some of these we've developed in-house, others we've brought in people like Michigan players, so we heard about the Cornell players. These are troops of actors that come to campus, and they do a great job pretending and acting like us as faculty. You can't really believe how ridiculous we actually look when they do the promotion and tenure committees or this year, we had a really good one. The department had, if any of you are ever thinking about bringing the Michigan players to your campus, I'd be very open to talking to you about we brought them 3 times, and I'm hoping next year to bring them at least once more. They are expensive, but they're excellent. Next year, we're going to focus on, it's called 1,000 Cuts, and it features a woman student who talks about, it's her experiences in a technical area, male-dominated, with her interactions with her peer students as well as faculty and staff. So we're excited about that. So those are examples of some of the unconscious bias activities we've done. We also have a series of career networking or career navigation activities, and those are listed here with workshops and mini grants. PNT Smarts is a Women of Color initiative that has really grown to everyone on campus, which is exciting. And then the P-Cubed, the Promotion Package Preparation Group, are cluster mentoring groups to help associate professors go up to full. And then finally, the lived experiences of women of color and deaf and hard of hearing. So impacts, at this point in a grant, when you're 5 years into it, I no longer talk about my personal perspectives on impacts. We've paid people enough money to tell us from the outside what our impacts are. So our evaluators give us this information, and we have detailed information on this. They also give us critiques about where we haven't made enough progress. So things that we've done very well on, we've increased the percentage of women at the full professor rank. Our applicant pools are staying strong and even growing a little bit for women, so that's good. We also have, throughout the search process, women remain candidates for faculty positions at even a little higher rate than men do, which also suggests positive things. Some of the areas that we have missed opportunities on is hiring. So we've done a lot more hiring since we got the advanced grant than we did in the 5 years prior, but we haven't capitalized well on that. And there could be many reasons to that. Most that we can see, our hypotheses have to do around the alignment of resources with strategy. So when you're trying to hire a woman faculty in bioengineering or mechanical engineering or computer science, chances are really good that if she's good, she's going to have a lot of good offers out there. Quite a bit of dual career, perhaps, if she comes with a partner. There may be other universities that have more progressive policies and practices, and you just can't compete with that. People are going to go where it feels like they're going to be the most successful. So resources can help a lot with that, and if we're not bringing them to the table, then we're underadvantaged in that area. And my closing thoughts here, I have a few slides, just 3, and I started them on the previous slide. You know, for inclusion to work, everybody, no one can be excluded in that. So something that we continue to work on with the institution is helping them understand that these inclusion kind of activities and workshops that we have, they're great, and I think that they do a lot for those of us in the choir. You know, it feeds our soul, so to speak. But the people in the choir, it's good if that choir keeps growing. You know, that's great. But then there's a whole lot of people that never come to any of our activities who are key decision makers or department heads. So when inclusion activities are sort of on their own, you know, maybe they have a lot of energy and they're a lot of fun and they're all good things, but they have a limited impact if it's not for everybody. So, you know, we are in an academic, many of us work in universities. You can't really force faculty to do much. It's hard, you know, to tell them. There's usually backlash. You know, it's not somewhere you want to go. But there are things you can do. And one of the things, we have a number of corporate people on our advisory board, and they just think we're such an interesting enterprise where we don't really train department heads in many of these critical business practices. And some universities do. We're behind the 8 ball on that. That's a big opportunity for us. So we're lobbying for, as they're developing department head training, you can just sort of embed inclusion within the whole thing. When you're talking about evaluations, you can be talking about inclusion. When you talk about team dynamics, managing a department meeting, of course, you'd want to talk about inclusion. How to make sure that even the quiet assistant professors are speaking, or those kinds of things, to understand power dimensions and differentials within organizations. So to try to embed these kinds of practices into the everyday way that we do business, we feel it's really crucial to keep in mind that in order for inclusion to work, no one can be excluded. So I think that that will be a very interesting dialogue that we'll continue to have with the university, and I thank you for your time, and I'm hoping that maybe we have time for a question.
We do.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and you did keep to time, so yes, we do have time.
Okay.
We have just one question. Please, Dr. Nunez-Shiri.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm Gina Nunez, UT El Paso, and I'm interested in the communication tools. What kind of instruments or workshops do you offer about the language to be inclusive? And how have you seen that? How do people respond to it?
You know, and we've done a number of communications-focused workshops. So some have been, and I've heard some of you talk about kind of the media ones, how to get your message out more. I don't think that's what you're talking about so much, but we've done some of those. The communication elements, when we do the unconscious bias workshops, or we bring in Michigan players, or we have another acting troupe that comes in as well, so much of what they talk about has to do with communication. So it's sort of embedded in things when we advertise those events, one or two of the bullets talks about communication, refining, coming to a more competent place with your communication abilities, but we've embedded them a lot more than having. I can think of one or two over the years where communication was in the headline of the workshop, and we moved away from that to embedding it more into the context of, you know, the implications if you're not communicating in an inclusive way, those kinds of things. Okay.
Super.
Thank you.
Can I have a round of applause to thank Dr. Bailey for her talk?
Thank you.